Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. So, have you ever just looked really closely at your own eyes in the mirror and wondered where that exact specific shade came from? Well, you're actually looking at a whole lot more than just a quirky family treat. Your eye color is practically a prehistoric survival tool. It's this biological masterpiece that your ancestors used to, quite literally, conquer the planet. Today, we're going to unpack the absolutely incredible story of human migration, adaptation, and evolution that is hiding right there in your iris. All right, let's just dive right into it. 70%. Over 70% of humans walking the earth right now have brown eyes. That means the vast majority of our global population shares this one foundational trait. But what about the other 30%? Well, if you don't have brown eyes, you're actually walking around with some truly fascinating genetic mutations that completely altered the course of human history. Think of this as the ultimate global genetic lottery. Brown is absolutely dominating the breakdown at 70%. But then things splinter off into these incredibly rare slices. We've got hazel at 5%, gray at just 3%, green at a tiny 2%, and the rest making up a 20% slice of blue, amber, and a few other wild variations. I want you to figure out where your own eyes fit into this, because the stakes behind how you ended up in that specific slice are absolutely thrilling. Okay, part one, the original survival tool. Let's look at how this all started by shielding our ancestors. Just picture our ancestors trekking across the blazing African savanna. I mean, they needed some serious protection to survive out there, right? And that protection came in the form of melanin. Now, melanin isn't just about color. It's a remarkably powerful pigment that functions like a natural, built-in sunscreen for your eyes. Research from the University of Copenhagen actually confirms that melanin can absorb up to 90% of the light entering your eye. This was purely about survival. It literally absorbs harmful UV radiation before it can damage the DNA in your eye cells, all while massively reducing glare in those bright, intensely sunny equatorial environments. Now, really quick, I want to bust a pretty common myth here before we move on. True black eyes, they actually don't exist. I know, no way, right? We hear the term black eyes all the time, especially when talking about populations from places like Africa, South Asia, or South Asia. But what we're actually looking at is an extreme, highly dense concentration of dark brown melanin. And honestly, this just shows why having all that dense melanin is literally a biological superpower. It absorbs almost all the light instead of scattering it around. That significantly lowers your risk of UV-related eye conditions over your lifetime, and it keeps your vision remarkably stable in harsh light. Plus, there's this super fascinating social advantage to it too. The pigment is so deep and dark that it actually masks pupil dilation. It hides your emotional expressions, making the eyes look incredibly powerful, deep, and just beautifully hard to read. Moving on to part two, the light-scattering mutations, or the physics of the genetic switch. So, as early humans migrated, their environments shifted dramatically, and biology kind of had to take a back seat to physics. It's a stark contrast. With brown eyes, you have the biology of pigment, absorbing up to 90% of the light. But with blue eyes, you're looking at the physics of structure. Blue eyes actually contain almost zero melanin at all. Because there's no pigment there, when light hits the eye, the shorter blue wavelengths just scatter right back out, while the longer wavelengths pass straight through. It is literally the exact same light-scattering physics trick that makes the sky above us look blue. Let's track how this actually happened, because the timeline here is wild. Somewhere between 6 and 10,000 years ago, one single random mutation in a gene called HERK2 literally just switched off brown eye production. Think about that for a second. That means every single blue-eyed person on Earth today descends from one single ancestor. During the Neolithic expansion, humans migrated from the Black Sea region up into northern Europe, and then boom. The frequency of this mutation just exploded, jumping from 0 to up to 95% in parts of northern Europe. Which brings us to a huge mystery that is still totally baffling researchers today. Why on earth did this blue eye mutation spread so incredibly fast? Going from one single individual to dominating a whole geographic region in just a few thousand years. That is lightning fast in evolutionary terms. It couldn't have been an accident. There had to be some massive advantage. Well, researchers are working with a few core theories here. The first one is functional. Having minimal melanin meant more photons could reach the retina, giving those ancestors a distinct visual edge in the super dim, low-light environments of those long northern winters. The second theory is all about sexual selection. Blue eyes were just so rare and striking that they became highly attractive, so mate preference accelerated their spread. But here's the real kicker, a massive curveball from recent ancient DNA analysis. It turns out light eyes evolved paired with dark, African-like skin way before skin lightening even happened. This completely demolishes the old scientific assumption that blue eyes were just some random side effect of evolving paler skin. Then you've got what I like to call the 3% enigma, gray eyes. Now, if you've got gray eyes, you actually have even less melanin than someone with blue eyes. And because of that extreme lack of pigment, gray eyes create this diffuse scattering effect across multiple wavelengths of light, which gives them that super cool, steel-like neutral tone. They don't change color much, and visually, there's just less variation for other people to track. This actually makes people with gray eyes emotionally harder to read, often giving them this enigmatic, culturally cool aura of wisdom or detachment. All right, part 3. The rare chameleons. Let's look at chemical instability and some totally unique genetic cocktails. So now we're shifting gears from structural illusions to the highly unstable chemical cocktails of the eye world. 2%. That's it. Just 2% of the global population has green eyes. That makes green eyes the absolute rarest common eye color on Earth. They're incredibly uncommon, and the underlying biology you need to actually create them is staggeringly complex. So how do you get green eyes? You need a very specific kind of rare ingredient called lipochrome. It's actually a yellow pigment, but that alone isn't enough. You have to mix that exact yellow lipochrome with a perfectly moderate, super precise dash of melanin. It takes a highly unstable, flawless cocktail of at least 16 different genes to hit this narrow sweet spot. If you get even a little too much melanin, they go brown. Too little, they go blue. It's basically a genetic tightrope walk. And taking that instability to the next level, we have hazel eyes. Found in about 5% of the population, hazel eyes basically use that lipochrome and intermediate melanin mix to physically change their appearance based on the lighting around them or even what you're wearing. It's the hazel chameleon effect. This reflects a tremendous evolutionary versatility, giving individuals adaptable UV protection when it's bright, while still keeping their eyes sensitive in the shade. Plus, this crazy genetic blending makes them totally unpredictable. You might end up with a green iris that has brown spots, or a brown iris with green rings, the whole shebang. Now, there's another color that people constantly confuse with hazel, but it's totally its own distinct thing: amber eyes. Think of these as the golden predators. Found in less than 5% of people, amber eyes have sky-high levels of lipochrome, but very, very little melanin. And unlike hazel, amber eyes do not change color. They stay intensely, solidly golden under absolutely all lighting conditions. And what's fascinating is that this is the exact same solid coloration you see in predatory animals like wolves, owls, and eagles. That's probably why amber eyes can subconsciously feel so commanding and intensely striking to look at. Okay, part 4, extremes and symmetrical glitches. Let's see what happens when biology breaks its own rules. As we get closer to the end of our explainer, we have to talk about what happens when human biology completely goes off script. Less than 1%. That is how exceptionally, mind-blowingly rare this condition is across the entire global population. We are talking about heterochromia, the condition where an individual actually has 2 entirely differently colored eyes, or massive, sharp color variations split right down the middle of a single iris. Normally, your body is really good at distributing melanin perfectly evenly across both your irises while you're developing. But heterochromia? That happens when that symmetry gets hit with a biological glitch, stuff like minor genetic mutations, localized early developmental shifts, or this fascinating concept called mosaicism. And because this lack of facial symmetry totally breaks the normal visual rules our brains are wired to look for, historically, a lot of different cultures viewed heterochromia as this powerful sign of human duality, a supernatural connection, or even a mark of divine favor. Which brings us to our final section, part 5, your evolutionary map, and the genetic lottery. So, we've trekked through the ancient savannas, we survived the ice ages, looked at genetic mutations, and unpacked those wild chemical cocktails. There's a saying that each color represents a chapter in human evolution, and that really hits the nail on the head. The crucial takeaway here is that your eye color, it is absolutely not random. Whether your ancestors needed maximum melanin to survive the brutal, blinding sun of the ancient African savannas, or they needed an extreme light-scattering mutation to navigate the dim, freezing winters of Ice Age Europe, looking in the mirror means you are looking at thousands of years of successful, hard-fought adaptation. So I want to leave you with one final question to chew on today. What ancient chapter of human survival is reflecting back at you in the mirror? The next time you catch your own reflection or, make eye contact with someone else, just remember, you aren't just seeing a pretty color. You are literally witnessing the survival of our species and the incredible, odds-defying genetic lottery that made you exactly who you are. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.